Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, and today I thought I'd go over the chart of Sylvester Stallone. Um, let's just get right into it, not wasting any time here. All right, Sylvester Stallone. He is a Cancer sun in the seventh house, and seventh house is actually pretty good. It's not good for relationships because the sun tends to burn through the relationships. There's too much ego involved. They can't see the other person very well. But it's good for stage performers and famous people because they need to be the center of attention in that kind of work. It's sort of like standing on stage. They are the light, they are the sun, they got the spotlight on them, and here are the masses. The seventh house is not only about individual relationships, it's also about the masses. So sometimes you see people, famous people with seventh house suns, and they have terrible relationships, but they're great at lighting up the stage for the masses, so to speak. Sagittarius ascendant, and then right here, this is so prominent, and this really indicates a lot of success. Jupiter conjunct Moon in Libra, conjunct the MC, right? This is so tight, so close. This is just like bingo. We don't really need to look at much else. We just be like, well, he's probably going to be very successful. But and then not only that, Venus is sextile exactly the moon, and then the MC by 1 degree and a couple degrees Jupiter. So and then it's in Leo. Venus is in Leo. Leo's the sign of, and then he has a whole Leo stellium, right? Venus, Pluto, Mercury. The vertex doesn't really count, but I thought I'd leave it in there just because it's so close to the Mercury and Pluto that maybe it's significant. Maybe that set off his vertex of destiny and cause some chain of events to happen, probably. Let's see, Saturn is in not very good dignity in Cancer. It's in the seventh house, and in Cancer, and Saturn is ruling. It's not ruling well. If you go by whole sign house, it's ruling the second and third. But if it's just quadrant houses, then it's just ruling the second. So either way, it is ruling the second. And so second in the seventh, second deals with speech. And isn't it interesting that he speaks he has like a weird slurred speech. Okay, that we could attribute that to a Saturn in detriment in the seventh house. Also, he's had like 3 or 4 marriages. I can't, a bunch of failed marriages and like on and off and stuff like that. The seventh house again, too much ego and Saturn in detriment there. But also we have a very strong square between Sun and Chiron here by 1 degree. And Chiron, as you probably know, is the wounded healer, but it's actually, I like to call it the wounded reject at first anyway. Then it becomes the healer and teacher. But it's the wounded reject when young because Chiron was rejected by his mother, and then he suffered the poison arrow in the foot from Hercules, mythologically. And Chiron represents a kind of rejection and wounding. And when Stallone was born, he actually suffered an injury during birth, where the doctors were pulling him out with forceps, and they damaged him and paralyzed half his face. That actually happened. And that's why, like, he's got like a droopy side, and he talks all funny. Chiron square the sun. Right. Yeah. So that's that is what it is. And then Jupiter's expanding his chironic features, making it very prominent. Remember Woody Allen had a very prominent Chiron too, and he's sort of like this goofball, oddball, you know. He didn't have a square of the sun, but he definitely had a prominent Chiron. So they both have prominent Chirons, and they both have these sort of oddities to them. And Chiron really represents the oddity, the thing that is just very different, very doesn't fit. It's oddball quality. Very prominent Neptune again, and we often see this for actors and artists, musicians, dancers, any creative type and or spiritual type. Yeah, so we also have a strong 8th house influence here. Leo is ruling the 8th house. Sun is ruling the 8th house. And so that's coming into the 7th house as well. But 8th house issues. I mean, think about the kind of movies he does. These are not lightweight movies. These are very intense movies. His first hit, Rocky. He wrote. He was a struggling actor, and he wrote Rocky after he was inspired by a boxing match. So the story goes, and he had been in other movies, but he just hadn't made it big. And they wanted to buy the rights to the script because they liked it, but they had other ideas for the main actor, and he said no, he won't sell it unless he stars in it. And finally they relented, and that's how he got Rocky, the lead role in Rocky, and it was a hit, huge hit, obviously. And he went to Philadelphia High School, and I think that's why he born in New York, went to high school in Philadelphia. I think that's why he put it in Philly. And Rocky's a story of success and achievement, and it's very similar to his chart, but 8th house deals a lot with fighting and war and struggle, and he's got this type Mercury conjunct Pluto conjunction, and his expression is very heavy, right? Ooh, it's not lighthearted. We don't like, kind of like Stallone, who had I think it was like Saturn and Pluto in the second. We don't really want to see Sylvester Stallone in a comedy, right? We're not going to be like, oh, that looks awesome, a nice lighthearted comedy with Stallone in it. Not that he doesn't have a sense of humor, but like, he's a bad guy, or he's a good guy who fights bad guys. Like, he's a fighter, right? He's this intense fighter. He's an underdog. There's the Chiron, underdog. Chiron's kind of an underdog. And he comes out on top eventually. Or he's Rambo, and he's a badass, and he's like killing people. I mean, not too different from Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger is probably a lot bigger. I think Stallone's kind of small, but he's a very intense, strong physique. Right. Yeah. So yeah, 8th house lord in the 7th is also really bad for relationships. So his relationships are not very good. His houses are very funny, very interesting, because it's at the 28th degree, his ascendant. So by whole sign house, this would be his whole first, but by quadrant houses, his whole first is over here. But anyway, the houses can be interpreted in multiple ways, and there's often multiple influences. Like, let's see here. Yeah, this would be the 10th whole sign house, Virgo. And then we get Mars in the 10th whole sign house. Even though his MC is over here. And then Jupiter would be in the 11th, but still MC is in the 11th. 10th and the 9th, which is that was not so good for career. And that doesn't make as much sense, because if 10th Lord's in the 9th, then 10th Lord being Mercury, 9th whole sign house, then his career has to do with philosophy, religion, higher education, things like that. But it's much more about, you know, much heavier, like, let's see, 10th Lord Venus in the 8th house. This is not such a 8th house, you know, 10th, I have 10th Lord in the 8th house, and I wouldn't think somebody with 10th Lord in the 8th house would be a famous actor, but the themes of their acting and writing, the movie making, his themes are very heavy and 8th house oriented. So that's where you see it, and it is Leo, right? And then we got North Node and conjunct Uranus tightly in the 6th house. So there we get a lot of fighting, right? And all his movies are about fighting in 6th house and competition. And Uranus is very independent, so, and kind of radical and off, you know, into just, you know, thinking outside the box. And with his North Node conjunct Uranus, I don't know too much about his political, social views, but they could be quite, if not evolved, at least radical. Sometimes Uranus is not like, you know, they don't believe in the right thing, they just believe in the very radical things. It depends on other factors, I guess. Like, I don't know how to tell, like, always, like, which is the very awakened Uranus and which is the just completely radical Uranus. Like, it could be sometimes revolutionaries, or like I said, like Hitler had a 12th house Uranus, and some people who have North Node or Sun conjunct Uranus are just like, you know, maybe they're like communists or something, you know, who knows. Anyway, definitely radical. He's, you know, his and it's in the 6th house, so like kind of like this, Uranus is so independent, and it's so like really does have a strong fighting quality. It wants to, you know, freedom, fighting for freedom, these sort of things. I want to add the draconic chart. That's why I'm not spending too much time on any particular aspect, because the draconic chart really adds another dimension and really fills out his personality and who he is and why he's, you know, what makes him tick. So right away we get ascendant in Libra, which puts all these houses, all these planets right in the 1st house. Neptune ascend by 2 degrees, ascending conjunct Neptune. Neptune is the planet for the arts, creativity, movies, that sort of thing. And then Chiron, and then Jupiter and Moon, all right in the 1st house with his draconic ascendant. That's very prominent. And then South Node also. Draconic North and South Node are always going to be, you know, 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Libra. So I don't pay too much attention to the sign there, but just the proximity that we're getting that. That means this is all like very familiar to him. Very natural. This quality of, you know, Neptune and all these planets, the stellium here. And here we get the Chiron conjunct the Sun in Cancer, which, oh, sorry, Neptune again. Chiron's a bit later. Neptune, I was looking at the position. Anyway, Neptune over the Sun. And now again, we're seeing, so ascendant Neptune, Neptune Sun. So a lot of Neptunian influence, right? Neptune again is that, like I just said, for, you know, movie star, film star, anyone, anything creative, arts, all that, you know, you want a strong Neptune. You would not make a good politician, because he's too many, like, actors and politicians, in a sense they go together, because a politician is kind of like an actor, but that's not the kind of politician we want, right? You want somebody who's not acting. You want somebody who's being authentic, and people can't tell the difference. Most people don't know who's acting and who's being real, and that's why we have horrible, you know, systems in place, because we get a lot of actors who are they're just playing a role, and they're actually being very sinister and devilish underneath the nice role that they're playing, they're acting. So for an actor, this is perfect, right? And then we get this exalted Jupiter right on top of this detriment Saturn. So that's really interesting as well. Jupiter in the seventh is very generous to others and very generous in relationships and saves relationships. This is probably his saving grace as far as relationships, because, in the seventh house, we have a detriment Saturn, and a sun, which is not good in the first place, plus it's ruling the eighth house. Eighth house in the seventh is not good. It's bringing eighth house crisis matters, these real intensity into relationships. All the negativity from the eighth house is going into the relationships. So that's not good. So his saving grace is that he is an exalted Jupiter in his draconic, which is right over this debilitated or detriment Saturn. I don't know, detriment. Moon in Leo, conjunct the MC. Well, it's always going to be conjunct the MC because the same positions, but Moon in Leo, so the furthering of the Leo theme. Leo for fame, MC in Leo, again for fame. Very important, very prominent, very appropriate for, a movie star. And he's not just a movie, director, producer, Mars in the sixth in Gemini over the Uranus and conjunct natal north node. So now the draconic chart, remember, is not the physical. It doesn't represent physical. It represents the feeling. It represents the moon. It represents past influences. And it's sort of past and future, because north node represents things that we need to learn and grow into, but the moon as a whole definitely represents the past. So it's sort of like the energetic quality of the past and of the future that we need to grow into as well. But Mars in the sixth is a fighter. Mars in the sixth is very strong, generally position-wise, because sixth house is for competition. Mars does excellent here. And what was this hit movie? Rocky. Rocky's a fighter, right? So, and now Mars conjunct Uranus is very explosive. Mars conjunct the North Node is showing that it's expanding this Martian influence, and he was working out from a young age, because he was actually bullied Chiron square sun as a kid, and then he started working out because he's a wimpy kid and he's got have his face not moving. Of course, he's going to be bullied in Philly and New York, so he's working out, he's getting strong, he's fighting his enemies, becoming a tough guy. So that's very prominent. And then Mercury, Gemini. Gemini is not he's not an actual fighter. Like, he didn't actually become a boxer, he became a movie star. And that's where the Mars and Gemini comes in. Gemini expression, right? So it's Taurus and Gemini, that's something you'd want to see prominent in singing and speaking, movies and music. So Venus and Gemini, and then Mercury in Taurus. So mutual reception, even though not by degree but by sign. So there's still an exchange of energies between Venus and Mercury. Not a very smooth one, but one nonetheless. And that would be fifth and sixth house. So bringing sixth house into fifth house matters, or fifth and sixth houses changing energy. So fifth house is the house of creativity. Sixth house, competition, fighting, service to others. But here, so like movies about fighting, very fitting. Again, and then still we have the Pluto, Mercury conjunction. Taurus stellium here. Sun in Aries, right? That's very prominent, and that's in the fourth house, but it's within 1 degree opposite the moon. So now the draconic Sun in Aries, which is exalted, which is much more prominent than moon in Cancer. Not that the moon in Cancer is bad, or it doesn't have. It's not. It's okay. Moon in Aries is very strong. Or sorry, Sun in Aries is very strong, and then now it's strengthening, giving the moon, giving what the feeling of a full moon. It's not an actual full moon, but it's a feeling of full moon. It's actually just past the first quarter. And that's very good for, it just creates a much stronger moon. Full moon is a very strong, bright moon. Brightens Jupiter too. Yeah. Because Jupiter you can see in the night sky, and if it's opposite the sun, it's going to be even brighter. So that's brightening up his MC and these planets. And yeah, it's just very good. It's angular and it's exalted. What else? Oh yeah, this is square. So the Uranus is square the ascendant and descendant. So it's just adding a lot of more independence, radical independent mindedness. It's square, so it's creating more tension with his relationships, making them unstable. And he did have unstable relationships. Marrying, divorcing, affairs. I think he had an illegitimate child. So, yeah. Wait, did he? I don't even remember. Oh, there's one interesting thing that I thought I'd bring up. In Rocky IV, he told Dolph Lundgren, sorry, punch me as hard as you can in the chest. He later said, next thing I know, I was in intensive care at St. John's Hospital for 4 days. It's stupid. So yeah, that's sixth house. Uranus is very unstable. And he's pretty much radical and unstable and Uranian. He'd probably be really interesting to talk to, like if you could get him up to open up and really tell his views about things, because he's probably not your typical dumb Hollywood person. He probably has very original thinking and views about things. Definitely not one of the woke liberals. He's not going to follow the crowd. He's just not saying that he's a conservative. I don't have no idea what his political views are, but they're probably very independent. So yeah, that's Sylvester Stallone, and I think it's pretty interesting. And this is definitely not one of the easier charts to read. It's much more complicated when the ascendant and the angles are right at the end of a sign, because it creates an overlap between whole sign and quadrant house systems, and so it creates multiple influences. People like to overly simplify and say, no, it's just this house or just that house. Yes, you can make it work because there is that influence, but if you want to see the whole picture, there's going to be overlaps and more than one influence. That's my opinion. That's the way it seems to me. I have pretty good feeling for these things. So, yeah, it's nuanced. It's complicated. You have to look at it from multiple angles to get a full picture. But yeah, that's Stallone. And he's not going anywhere. South node is activating Jupiter in the MC. North node is activating Uranus, but also Gemini, and this 8th house stellium, which is in Leo. So he might be more, as he gets older, he might be more about writing and producing than actually starring, although he's still starring in films. But, 8th house is not as seen as MC. It's a little more hidden. It's a little more behind the scenes, but very powerful. And he has a lot of sway in Hollywood. I mean, he's has the whole Expendable series, which is like, he's gotten every action star basically, and then some to star in those movies. They're like, it's like the biggest A-list collaboration, I know of. It's pretty damn impressive. I don't think they're that great as far as movies go, but it's pretty damn impressive. And it shows the power and control that he has, which is very much an 8th house thing. He has tons of sway in Hollywood, obviously, to pull all those people together. So that's it. Like I said, I could have just stopped right here and just been like, bam, that's why he's famous. Don't say anymore. But I think with looking at the whole picture with the draconic and everything else, it really comes into play. You really see the full character of Sylvester Stallone. So, all right. That's it for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to book a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com, or email me at macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. Bye.